This is the Lightning Junkies podcast with your host, Chaz. On this week's episode of the podcast, we have Ben Ark, and we're talking about being a prolific prototype creator person. Before we jump into this episode, a message from your friends at the Lightning Junkies podcast. If you take value away from this podcast, please consider supporting us. You can do this by listening to us on Breeze Wallet or one of the other many value for value apps you can find at newpodcastapps.com. You can also support us by going to lightningjunkies.net/support, where you can find all the different ways that you can support Kat and I in our Lightning Network journey. Please help to keep this podcast ad-free by supporting us today. Now let's jump into this episode. How you doing, Ben?
Yeah, good. That's a good descriptor. I like it. I might change my description from Bitcoin hobbyist to prolific prototyper.
Do you think that's a kind of accurate description? Because I feel like that's kind of what you do. You kind of go around and you find little subtopics or subcategories, and you just fuck around and you make stuff. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, it is. I get very excited about something, and then I kind of feel this need to build something, and then I build something, and then afterwards, this is why a lot of my projects, sorry to the people out there, they're pretty poorly maintained. And thankfully, some of the better projects, because some of them are nuts, some of the better ones, which actually are useful, can pull in some proper developers who are able to keep an eye on the repos and maintain them. I generally just get excited about, so I'll hear about something, I get excited about, I'll have an idea for something, I want to make it. And then I'll, burn the midnight oil. It'll be all consuming. And then, a few days later, I'll move on to something else, which is the very enjoyable thing about obviously working on a protocol like the Lightning Network, which is on the edge of technology. So there's all this sort of blank space which you can work into and you can discover and do things for the first time. And like one of the more recent things I've been working on this week is, point of sale, which uses LNURL Pay. So it means that the point of sale could be completely offline. And if you think about it, that's, in our modern world, that's actually better than the points of sale devices we have in shops now. You go to a shop quite often, they'll say, the point of sale isn't connecting to the Wi-Fi, or we've had, connection issues. But the point of sale which I've made, it just creates this encrypted PIN, which it then encrypts into the LNURL. So when they've paid it, they get a receipt, and in the receipt, it has the decrypted PIN. So they can then say that PIN to the merchant, and then the merchant on the point of sale can press another button and they can see an decrypted version of that PIN, and they can confirm that there was a payment. So that was like an idea I had. And I think in our Telegram group, one of the Telegram groups, I was like, oh, damn, I've had this idea now. It was annoying because I've got quite a lot of stuff on in my real life, and there's lots of things going on in, say, LNbits, for example. And then I was like, okay, I've just got to do this thing. I've got to make this thing, get it out of the way. And then it's very satisfying to make something and realize it's the first iteration of that thing which has ever existed. And you're making breakthroughs. Even, in fact, the other day, someone who was making this dad, in fact, who's teaching his kid electronics by doing some of my tutorials, making some of the little gizmos, which I've made, the hardware gizmos. He bought the sweet machine, which I use, the candy dispenser I use to make a lightning candy dispenser. And the version I made had a little screen on it, and it would go fetch an invoice, display the invoice on this little screen. You could pay it, and then it would spit out the sweets. But I'd also made another project, which was LNURL Trigger. So that used an LNURL Pay allows you to have like a static QR code, which you can scan, pay, and then just keep scanning and paying. You don't have to keep generating these new invoices. So I said to him, I was like, well, why don't you mix those two projects together? And then, then your candy dispenser, instead of having a screen, you can just use a little sticker for a QR code. And it's much cheaper to make. It's actually much easier to kind of set up because the LNURL Trigger, which I think it's called, that project is very easy set up. You can just kind of put in the variables like your LNbits wallet or your LNbits install. You can put them all on through an access point which it generates, and you can access on your phone. So there's very limited programming involved in it. And this obviously you don't have the screen, you have to connect as well. Anyway, so I said, why don't you mix those two projects? And he did. And then, within half an hour, he sends me this picture. He's created the most advanced candy dispenser on the planet. using this LNUL protocol, and you're able to send a tiny amount of Satoshis and then get some sweets for the Satoshis. So he had that experience too, that, he owns something, he's got something in front of him, which another one on the planet doesn't exist, and it's on the cutting edge of development. People will inevitably start to find useful, as we've seen with all the adoption we're seeing in El Salvador. People will actually start using these sci-fi creations, which we do, and they'll use them in the real world, and it'll be useful for someone. So yeah, it's a great feeling. I'm very lucky and privileged to be around at a time where it's fairly easy to make breakthroughs. I imagine it's kind of like the internet was fairly early on. It was quite easy. And I think this is why we had this crazy .com bubbles, and it's quite easy to kind of come up with a breakthrough idea, which no one had done before. Whereas now, obviously that gets harder and harder. The more people who are educated and able to wield the internet and do technical things on the internet. So I imagine it's the same with Bitcoin. As more and more players get into the technology and more people start experimenting with things like Lightning Network, it will be harder to make these breakthroughs. But currently, it's super easy and very satisfying.
Last time you were on the show of June of last year, the main topic that we were talking about was like do-it-yourself hardware. So for example, the M5 stack, I have it right here in front of me. I kind of played around with it and had it be like a Lightning POS, basically. It seems to me like the pathway that you took, with your being a prolific prototyper, as it were, was you're kind of going through and doing these projects in a way to kind of teach yourself. If I remember correctly, you beforehand didn't have a lot of experience in hardware, and you kind of just used these projects as a way to kind of teach yourself, various pieces of the puzzle. If I remember correctly, you already had C experience.
No, not at all. I mean, yeah, I had very limited experience. I mean, I'd done some rudimentary electronics covering other teachers when I was a teacher, covering their electronics class. I was always very excited. There was something called PIC chips, which were quite big in UK schools, probably about sort of 15 years ago. And they were actually earlier than that, maybe sort of 18 years ago. And they were just very simple little, I don't even think they were microcontrollers, just little chips, which you could kind of like, you had like a piece of software, you could make like a flowchart diagram, and you could get it to turn an LED on, and you could program it to act like a traffic light system or something. And I remember being very excited about that. And I was, I think I covered a friend's class a couple of times teaching the kids. I'd order maybe an Arduino Uno or something and try and muck about with it. It was obviously the learning curve was quite steep then. There was less, and the hardware was less forgiving, I think. Whereas now I think the hardware is more forgiving. There's a hell of a lot of material online. When I paused teaching for a few years to play around with Bitcoin stuff and do some of the things in my life, you can search some Arduino microcontroller project on YouTube and then think, well, can I use Lightning in this? Can I take this thing and use it in some way to send Lightning payments around? But there was quite a lot. So, like that point of sale. So, sometimes I think maybe I taught myself down a little bit too much. So like that M5 stack point of sale project, there was probably like 20 different points of sale I made using lots of different electronics hardware. There was a few kind of end projects which came out of it. Like there was the Quickening, which was an under $8 version of this, pretty much the same point of sale as what you made. And then there was the M5 stack sats version, which was a really nice sort of off the shelf unit, which has, a screen, and it has kind of like a calculator keypad on it. So you can input an amount, and you can, press like a hashtag, and then it has like a nice little microcontroller, which was powerful enough to reach out to the internet and get an invoice and then check to see if the invoice has been paid. And that's how you're able to make that point of sale. But yeah, there was quite a lot of kind of R&D. You look at Arduino type projects out there on the internet, out there on YouTube, and then you start thinking, well, how do I apply Bitcoin to this? That's something which other people aren't doing. So before you know it, you're in virgin territory or doing something new. And that's when you need to start exploring, different components and trying to use different components for the thing you want to make. But yeah, there was a whole bunch of different versions to that point. So probably my favorite version used the old Nokia 2010 screen, one of those old Nokia 2010 screens, because they're really low powered and I just really like them. And I actually managed to squeeze a Lightning QR code onto them. The only problem was that you couldn't, if you had root hints, which are very useful if you're accepting payments. If you had root hints in your Lightning invoice, then it wouldn't be able to display the invoice. So I think it was Jorg from Room 77. He started using that M5 stack sats, the M5 stack version of the point of sale, which you made. And that was great because it was being used in a busy bar, taking a lot of Bitcoin payments, and it survived, the stress test. There was some great feedback from Jorg actually using the point of sale, in real life. And then he did a podcast actually I was listening to, and in it he said, it's the first point of sale which you can run and use, like, specific point of sale device which you can run and use without a trusted third party. And I was like, oh, I hadn't even thought of that, but it's absolutely true. Like, usually if you're using a point of sale terminal or device, you have to use a trusted third party. You have to use like a bank, or you have some sort of like point of sale provider who routes payments through to your bank or whatever else. Then you start getting, positive feedback from people out in the community are really encouraging. People start making your projects like you did, and you get really nice feedback. Good to go back to what you originally said. Yeah, absolutely. I used all of that as an excuse to learn electronics and learn to program. If I was to do it all again, I think I would probably, sit down for a few months and do some actual courses on something like Udemy, or I don't know, some, official courses which teach you programming in a certain language stage by stage. Because there was a lot of hair pulling out of. There was a lot of times I get stuck over something really silly, like I didn't know what the difference between like a float and an integer or something. And they're all like the rudimentary building blocks you're taught when you learn programming properly through a course or something. So I wish I'd done that rather than just sort of hacked away. But, the hacking away stuff's fun. At the time, you get more of a reward and sort of instant gratification, whereas having to take a more official way of learning something, it takes a little bit of time before you can start getting your hands dirty and building things. But yeah, if I was to do it again, then and my advice to people would be to just sit down for a month or so, and it's not hard, and do a couple of courses.
Would you say that the way that you pick your projects is largely intuitive? You don't sit around and say, well, I need to work on X, Y, Z because it's the most important thing. It seems to me you just kind of pick what is interesting to you and you just have at it from there.
Yeah, it's things which kind of get in the way. Like, pretty much early on, when I first started making that sweep machine for the first time, before I could even get a QR code on one of the little e-paper screens I was using at the time, that was a battle. It took me a few months just to get the QR code on the little e-paper screen. Before I even got to that stage, I was like, well, why do I have to have a screen? Can I not just have like a QR code, a static QR code? I was in the New York Lightning hack day, and I met with this guy called George. Still friends. I was chatting to him today, in fact. He'd built an arcade machine. He wanted to accept Lightning payments on it. And we were kind of fleshing out this idea. And he was like, well, actually, you could just have a URL in a QR code, and then your wallet could just like do a request to that URL. It could send you back an invoice, and then you could just reuse that QR code as a static QR code. And obviously that idea is pretty much what LNUL Pay is, which the BLW Bitcoin Lightning wallet lot were working on afterwards. That's just something which kind of got in the way of me being able to make something. So as soon as you start sitting down and you try and make something on Bitcoin, you're like, okay, something gets in the way of it, or something's annoying and persistently kind of takes your time until you think, well, okay, there needs to be a solution for this thing to make this experience easier. LNbits, for example, a cornerstone to that thing being developed was that everything I'd need to make multiple versions of it to talk to LND, Lightning DC Lightning, OpenNode, LNPay, all these different, potential funding sources, or Claire, if I was making that point of sale terminal, I'd have to build like a load of different versions just to talk to all those different funding sources. It was very clear that rather than replicating that work and then all those people out there in the world, making things on Lightning, having to replicate that work, it makes sense to have just a piece of software which sits between the funding source and between the thing you're building, and it just does the connection between the funding source and the thing you're building. And then that's maintained separately by lots of people who, also find that a useful service. So I don't know if you remember fairly early on, people would say, I've made this for LND, or I've made this for Lightning D. More and more I'm seeing people saying, okay, now I've made this for LNbits or that for LNbits. And they're just using LNbits as kind of that middle layer to communicate with the funding source. Essentially all a Lightning funding source is doing is, fetching an invoice, checking if it's been paid, and giving it an invoice and paying an invoice. They're the sort of core functionality of like a Lightning node or a Lightning funding source. that's something which just got in the way of me building stuff. So, and no one else seems to be making anything. It's like, okay, we need to sit down and just make something to make my own life a little bit easier. And then other people find it useful as well. I think a lot of the development comes from that. This idea that you can kind of sit around and wait for kind of divine inspiration is just nonsense. So you just get your hands dirty, just start building. Even if the thing you start building is stupid and pointless, you'll probably find something useful and productive will come out of it eventually.
Before the show started, we were talking about the Fiat Jaff and Rusty episode. As I'm sure you know, in that episode, we explore their very different worlds. Rusty being a protocol developer and Fiat Jaff kind of living in the app layer somewhere.
There's a great weird article, which if you Google, you can probably still find. And it's on his Fiat Jaff's weird.xyz website. And it's a text file. I think it's like BIP170. And he's like, this is why BIP170 will fail and LNURL will win. It's not offers, I don't think, which Rusty's proposing. It's like an old proposal when LNURL first started. And in there, there's one of the things he says is one of the bullet points is LNURL is created by weirdos who've got nothing to do but push its survival and success. And I think that's true. Like, you down in the gutter, all the sci-fi weirdos building strange applications and hardware and software using Lightning Network, they found this problem like I did with that sweet machine very early on. You're like, I need a static QR code. And then thankfully that problem was addressed by a bunch of gigabrains like Anton and Fiat Jaff, and they realized that having a wallet, a Lightning wallet, do a safe, get requests to a URL can be really powerful. You can use it for creating channels. You can use it for having like a withdrawal link, like a faucet. You can use it for paying a static QR code. You can use it even for authentication because there's LNURL auth as well. And then they were in the position where they had the ability to sit down and actually write a really nice protocol and address that problem properly. But that all came from the gutter by the weirdos, in the weird Telegram groups. Whereas on the other side, you've got the protocol devs, and fairly early on, I think maybe this is something which was passed over from Bitcoin on-chain, because a lot of that's crypto heady and the software is fairly well developed, like core is fairly well developed. And it's less of an application layer, so you're less likely to kind of have people like building applications on it so much. But then when Lightning Network came along, these obviously have protocol developers, and obviously they've got to meet and decide specification. But I do think there's kind of this technocratic atmosphere, or there was, amongst some of the protocol developers. They were the geniuses, and we should just all, like and retweet their tweets, and we shouldn't then get our hands dirty and start building things ourselves. LNURL was clearly something which had to happen. My friend George, who I mentioned before, who did the arcade machine, I was bugging him to like write a BIP or something, get the idea out there and a suggestion of how people might find it useful. And Christian Mussel as well, actually. He was involved with our conceptual version of LNURL before LNURL existed. There is actually a proposal somewhere on the mailing list by me saying, I think it'd be great if we could have a URL and then have the ability to hit that URL and get an invoice. You'd have smaller URLs. And it's kind of like a whole bunch of benefits to having something like that. And I think one of them was it could inform protocol development. And then I had no response, actually, from my post on the Bitcoin mailing list. Actually, I posted in the wrong place. It should be on the Lightning mailing list. So probably that's why I didn't have any response. But the only person who did respond was Fiat Jaff. And obviously they were working on the LNURL stuff. So that was really cool. Nice bit of history.
Are you one of the sci-fi weirdos here?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Just making goofy sci-fi stuff. In fact, the El Salvador news was a shock. It was, a lot of people didn't like it, obviously, because of the scenario in which it's kind of forced upon people, and it should rather be holistically kind of adopted by people. And I agree with a lot of that sentiment. But it is exciting to see things working in the wild, because that's how your software and hardware is informed, and brought me back to my original point over the Rusty stuff. So, yeah, I mentioned that the LNURL, having something like that would inform protocol development. When I went to the Lightning conference in Berlin, and LNURL was like a thing in the wild, lots of people using it, pretty much all wallets had implemented LNURL withdraw, and about half the Lightning wallets had implemented LNURL pay. So people were kind of starting to find that useful. It was, the unsaid thing at the conference, but lots of people were talking about it at the bar. Lots of people were playing around with it in the hack space. It very much felt like a new tool something which had been built by people in the gutter. There wasn't that much mention of it on the stage by the protocol developers who were there. A couple of their proposals were very close to what LNURL is and what LNURL allows. I think it was in Rusty's talk at the end, someone, asked a question which did prompt him to say, I really like what LNURL has done and it's great, and now I just want more of it. He was proposing his offers concept. So it did do that. It did, by us lot getting our hands dirty and building something in the gutter for the people who are actually building stuff on the application layer and trying to make Lightning more usable and more useful. It has gone and informed the protocol development. And I think that's the way it should be. I think, some of the stuff which the community has pushed and implemented has humbled those protocol devs. And now I think there's less of that kind of technocratic, vibe from them. It's more of like a feedback, community feeding back to them feeding back to the community, and a bit more of a conversation, which is how it has to be. Going back to the other point you raised about Bitcoin being adopted, and I mentioned the El Salvador thing, when that point of sale was used in a busy bar in Berlin, that again, that's probably where LNbits came from, because he was using it in the bar, and not a popular subject, but one of his problems was that, he needs to pay taxes and he needs to know what transactions came in through the bar and what people were buying. He needs to be able to gather all that information, and he couldn't on his Lightning node. So one of the first things we built into LNbits was just the ability to export to a CSV file, so you can pull it into your QuickBooks and you can make sense of those transactions, because real world businesses live in tax jurisdictions, they have to pay taxes. So but that's something I wouldn't have thought of, because I'm not a business owner, I'm not running a bar or a cafe or something. So you only get that feedback from having something run in the wild.
Before we kind of launch into LNbits here, might as well kind of wrap up this conversation about LNURL and offers a bit. Obviously, we've had LNURL for a while. The Lightning conference was in October of 2019. We're nearly 2 years after that event. And since then, offers/Bolt 12 has actually gotten fairly close to being a real world thing. So at this point, I guess my question is, what's your general opinion of offers/Bolt 12, maybe in reference to LNURL?
To me, I don't want too much in there. I just want it to generate an invoice, pay an invoice. And then for me to be able to check to see if the invoice is being paid. And a lot of that stuff I want to kind of just abstract out to something else, into applications. The only drawback with something like LNURL, it is, dependent upon HTTPS, like a secure certificate, and you are using the internet rails. If the internet went down and you're using Lightning Network in some other way which wasn't dependent upon the internet, then you won't be able to make use of the protocol. There's a good argument for and against making these nodes more complex, and protocol developers need something to do. They need to keep solving problems, so they're going to keep coming up with ideas, I suppose. And I'm sure people will find it useful. But to your point, it's been 2 years, and some of the stuff, it's like that point of sale thing which I told you about with the the LNURL pay point of sale, which I've been working on. Did I tell you about that? Did I ever mention that in the podcast so far?
I'm not sure if you mentioned it here, but I think you might have mentioned it in the previous episode, actually.
The most up-to-date version of this point of sale adventure, which I've been on for the past few years, is, it's a week ago when I realized I could use an LNURL pay in a point of sale, and I could encrypt a PIN, and then the customer can prove that they've made the transaction by having a decrypted version of that PIN sent back to them by the server, which is doing the LNURL stuff. And then the merchant, using the point of sale, can then press a button and see the PIN and confirm that they've made the payment. But what that means is you have an offline point of sale, which doesn't exist currently out there in the real world. That's such an obvious idea now, having made the thing. Not quite made it, but almost made the thing. It should be done in the next couple of days, and I'll do tutorial and things for it. But now having made it, that's such an obvious idea. It's like it's not complicated. You just encrypt a PIN on the POS and then give that encrypted PIN and blah, blah, blah. But it takes a while for those obvious ideas, because you're breaking new ground, for those obvious ideas to kind of take root and for someone to build something. So we've had 2 years of people building on top of using LNURL. Not so much LNURL Pay, because that's only now just been implemented by pretty much all Lightning wallets. But LNUR withdraw, that was implemented pretty early on. Like I said, at that by the Lightning conference, pretty much most wallets had it implemented. So we saw a lot of people building solutions using LNUR withdraw, lots of products and solutions, and building it into their software as a way of, withdrawing money, for example, or sending a withdrawal link through an email. So there's always people kind of breaking new ground. But now LNUR Pay is kind of being implemented in all the wallets. Now people are starting to take that more seriously and starting to implement that and play around with that software and technology. And it's the same with the authentication LNUR Auth. And I think the same will happen with offers as well. There will be a period where people just need to wrap their heads around this new technology and then start building things on it. And obviously, the LNUR stuff has had much more of a head start. So lots of people are building stuff using it now. Hopefully, maybe some of that could port across to the offers thing. For now, I think, LNUR is not going anywhere. People are going to carry on using it. And it's going to take a few years for offers to really kind of be used and to sink in among the people developing things.
I would be remiss not to mention LND's contribution to this world of AMP invoices. Do you have any opinion about AMP invoices at all?
I keep my world deliberately quite small, and I always feel like a Luddite when I have these conversations with well-informed Bitcoiners such as yourself, who have this like crazy general knowledge of what's happening in the protocol and what's happening with the Bitcoin on-chain protocol. I just really focus on the stuff I need to be able to build certain things. If either offers or amps or whatever, if they become used widely, then obviously I'll learn about them and start trying to build stuff with them. But rather than kind of confuse myself trying to wrap my head around all these proposals, even with offers, my knowledge is very limited. Your average Bitcoiner probably knows more than I do on the topic. I just use what's really available to me there and then. So I haven't got anything productive or anything, informed to say on it without a little bit of research.
No problem. Let's go ahead and kind of jump back into LNbits here. So you mentioned it quite a few times. You mentioned quite a few of the extensions that have been built with it. I think we kind of explained it last time, but just in case we have listeners that are too lazy to listen to the last one for whatever reason, do you want to kind of briefly inform them what LNbits is first here?
It came from a lot of problems. So it's a solution for a lot of problems. Like I said, I've already mentioned about the being a kind of a layer for connecting a funding source to your application. So now, my new point of sale, it just communicates with LNbits. And then I can use any funding source underneath LNbits. And so the new point of sale I'm making is using LNUR Pay. I can fund it with, LND, Lightning D, OpenNode, LNPay, Spark Wallet. And there's a couple of others I can't remember. There's that problem it's solving. The other problem which I wanted as well was multiple accounts, and I bugged OpenNode for ages because I used OpenNode a lot. It's a great service. The KYC thing kind of sucked, but when you're like prototyping and building things on Lightning and you don't want to spin up a node and you don't want to like expose your node to that dodgy thing which you're developing, which actually can spend funds. Like, I'm building my ATM, for example, and I don't want to like go to the effort to make a whole node and then make channels and stuff and then give it my admin key and then somehow mess it up and like lose my funds. OpenNode's a great service. The only problem with OpenNode was, I don't know if it's still the case now. I hope it isn't. The only problem with OpenNode is you have one account. So you can't keep too many funds on there. Because if you do, then if you're building something which has admin keys, then you could lose those funds. So I wanted the ability to have multiple accounts. So my ATM, which I was building, again, this comes from a problem which I had. I had an ATM, which I was building a Lightning ATM. It needed the ability to spend funds, but I didn't want to give it access to all my funds. So I needed just an account, which I could put maybe $50 in or $100. And then when that draws down, I could just top it up. Or maybe I could write a little script which tops it up automatically or alerts me if it's, ran out or something, so I can go check the ATM. But I needed something. So that's another problem which needs to be solved, was multiple accounts. And then the other thing which I thought I really liked the concept of was, like WordPress is renowned to be shitty software. It looks kind of nice. And, for non-technically minded, it's pretty easy to work with, which is nice. It's got a good UI, although maybe nowadays it probably hasn't compared to what else is out there on the market. But the reason WordPress was successful was they made it, crikey, I mean, it's not easy now, but at the time they made it fairly easy to kind of build extensions on. So if you tried to build like a Joomla extension, it was a lot harder than building like a WordPress extension. So with WordPress, you start off with a very simple blog, and then you can take it in any direction you want to take it. And you want to make a shop, okay, you go and use WooCommerce, or if you want to, I don't know, have video content, then you can use some other extension. And if you're going to have like a community, like a forum, you can have like extension for managing users. I really like the idea of having extensions, and also because I'm a bit of a goofball and I get excited about something and I focus on it and I want to build something and then I want to move on and do something else. The concept of extensions appeals to me a lot because I can sit down, I can spend a whole day writing something and then have this new functionality, but I don't have to replicate all the base functionality of like communicating to a funding source. So I don't know if anyone remembers, but like I made the first faucet using LNURL withdraw. It's called the Sinclair faucet. After Sinclair, the Clive Sinclair, the guy who made the ZX Spectrum, if there's any UK computer enthusiasts out there. So I made the Sinclair faucet, and that was, you could put an amount in and then put another variable like how much you could pull on each withdraw, and then how long you had to wait between withdraws, and then you paid a Lightning invoice, and then you had a link and you could share it with people, and it would have an LNURL withdraw on, and then you could hit it and it would give you some money, give you some sats, and then if you hit it again, it might say you had to wait another 30 seconds or minute or whatever whatever time you put in there. So that was like a fun little project. And like people within Bitcoin really liked it, and people on the Twitter liked it, kind of got their imagination firing about LNURL withdraw and using them as faucets and having this idea of putting time in there as well. So that was a great little project, but it's a very small amount of functionality, but, essentially, which was sitting on top of the same functionality which everyone else is replicating, which is talking to a funding source, getting an invoice, paying an invoice, blah, blah, blah. So it made sense that you would have a piece of software which do all that heavy lifting for you. You could then just add some functionality on top of through an extension, had multiple accounts, and then also the Insta Wallet thing. So Christian Rutzel, he was involved in the Chaos Communication Congress, and he would run this. This is a big event in Leipzig in Germany, where like 20,000 hackers from around Europe, they descend on these big aircraft hangars and they do all these amazing things. And there's a Bitcoin assembly, it's a little area for Bitcoiners, which is actually embarrassingly small because a lot of those anarchist hackers don't like Bitcoin, which is a travesty in my opinion. But hopefully they'll start coming on to Bitcoin. Anyway, get back on topic. Someone made, I can't remember, I always feel really bad because I can't remember the name of the project. And obviously, because it's such an inspiration to me with the LNbits, I need to remember the name of this project. So you could probably Google it and find it. Someone made like an Insta Wallet. So you could have a QR code and then it would open a browser, and then you would be able to like use your camera to scan an invoice and then pay an invoice. It would be like a Lightning wallet in a browser. Although it was really buggy and it would open the wrong camera and it didn't really work properly, but the concept was there and it was solid. So Christian really liked that, and he was like, yeah, it'd be nice for when we go to these, when you do a meetup or you do a conference or, you're evangelizing people into Lightning Network, it'd be nice if there was a way to give them like an instant wallet where they don't have to download a piece of software. They have an instant wallet. You can give them some funds and then they can start paying for experiences. So that was the idea of the Insta Wallet thing, in the browser. Yeah, that was another kind of cornerstone to the LNbits project. So it does all those things. Firstly, when you open up, it's just a Lightning wallet. It's connected to a funding source, which can be your own funding source if you're running it yourself, which we advise. Or you could use somebody else's LNbits solution. So you can, provide like a custodial kind of open node. I think as well at the time as well, I was kind of thinking about like custodians. I'm not against custodianship. I think Bitcoin throughout is custodial, to be honest, but it's just a varying spectrum of custodianship. But I do think that it's important there's like lots of custodians out there. So I don't just want like one open node and an LNPay. I want like the ability to make it easy for lots of people to become custodians, micro-custodians, custodians for their friends, family. You're making banks, aren't you? The ability to easily make a bank. So I think that was kind of in the air at the time as well, like decentralizing custodianship by making it easy for anyone to be a custodian. So you can run it yourself. You can use somebody else's LNbits install if they let you, and you can generate as many wallets on it as you want. And each wallet has its own API keys. It's very easy to make a new wallet. So you can, do goofy experiments, or you could just have a wallet for your point of sale, or you could just have a wallet for your ATM, or if you've got an arcade machine hall, each arcade machine could have its own wallet. So that's quite kind of useful. So that's how it starts off. It's just a wallet system connected to a funding source. But then if you go into extensions, it then has like loads of extensions for doing all the LNURL stuff, because it was pretty hard to kind of do LNURL stuff on your own funding source, like your LND or your Lightning D. But now LNbits makes that really easy. Like you can mint an LNURL withdraw, an LNURL pay, and you can put your LNURL pay on your Twitter page and people can pay that invoice. You can put it in a picture. There's extensions for all sorts. There's a point of sale extension, which is like a shareable point of sale, which is pretty nice, where you can spin up a point of sale and it's denominated in a fiat currency. So it's easy for, if you own a cafe and you want to accept Bitcoin, you have people working at the cafe and you don't have to explain to them Satoshis and how to denominate your coffees in this volatile Satoshi thing. You can just denominate in USD and then it converts to Satoshis on the screen. And then you can press a button it looks really nice on your phone. It runs on your phone nicely. You can press a button on this point of sale and then it generates a QR code. And then whoever's on next can scan that QR code. They then it's just a web browser with, point of sale, like a keypad thing on it, and generates an invoice. They can then use that point of sale as well. So that's a really nice, quick, super quick way of accepting Bitcoin. And in fact, I think it's IBEX in Guatemala. They've got a whole business model, which they're in El Salvador. For people who will have to obviously accept Bitcoin, really they need to convert to fiat because of stability issues. They just provide that point of sale. So they go to you and they give you this point of sale, shareable point of sale, and you can't connect to the LNbits back end at all. IBEX manage that themselves. And then when the merchant, receives payments, after they've received, however much, they can go to IBEX and then say, can I have the fiat equivalent of what I've received? And then IBEX gives them the fiat equivalent and then takes a small percentage for providing that service. So there's a whole service based on one LNbits install and then one extension. and they've stripped out loads of functionality of LNbits. In fact, they've stripped out all the, ability to spend from LNbits because they don't need that. They just need the ability for Lightning payments to come into it. And that's been quite a successful extension. But so that's another one. I made one called Video Copilot, which makes it easy to accept Lightning payments while you're doing like a YouTube video, like a live stream. And then you can get it to trigger events. So I have like little animations which trigger on the screen. There's some examples on that on the World Crypto Network. We do like a weekly panel discussion on there. And there's a few times where I've used that extension. So people can pay some money. They can trigger a rocket or something to animate on the screen. If they've got the right wallet, LNURL which I'm using, actually allows you to attach a comment to a payment as well. So if they attach a comment to the payment, that also displays on the screen, which is pretty cool.
The one that I saw, I can't remember, 6 months ago or something, Crypto Graffiti was doing a project with you and LNbits, I believe.
No, not me. That was Fiat Jeff. That was, yeah.
Oh, okay. But it was using LNbits on the back end though, right?
Yeah, they made a whole extension called DJ Livestream. And this is interesting, actually. Stumbled across, by trying to solve a problem, I think it's a revolutionary concept, which could have quite profound impact. So I'll go into a little bit more detail. So Crypto Graffiti and Fiat Jeff work together. So when Crypto Graffiti does his DJ set, people can tip him. Obviously, with Lightning, normally that's impossible because you need to keep generating invoices. So you have this LNURL, people tip him. And then into the extension, which is like a real personalized niche extension, is the ability that if you pay enough, you then get a download link for the current track which is playing. And what's cool is when you make that payment, a percentage goes to the producer of the music, and then a percentage goes to the DJ. So Crypto Graffiti gets his 10%, and then the producer of the actual song gets his 90%. So you split the payment. And that's just something they worked into it. And I don't think they thought it was kind of just solving a problem, or you're playing somebody else's music, so you need to be able to give them some money. But I don't think they picked up on how cool that concept is. So in the LNbits chat, we all got started freaking out because we're like, yeah, you could split payments. You could have a micro venture, people making coffee, and they could all decide how much each person gets. They could volunteer. They could decide sort of democratically amongst themselves, you get this amount, you get this amount, you get this amount. And then they could start a venture. And as soon as somebody pays for a coffee, that payment could be split among all the participants in that venture. After the live stream thing came a split payments extension, which does specifically that. I think it's huge. You can keep splitting. So with the split payments extension, you say to a wallet, if funds come into this wallet, then split between this wallet, and this wallet. So you could keep doing that, kind of tree down. So you could have it go to a different department. And then as each department gets the funds immediately at the point of sale, when someone's bought a computer, say, for example, then each department in the computer factory gets their chunk, which has been pre-decided. And then each person within that department gets their little chunk, and it all happens instantly. And you can keep looking at your, if you're not getting enough money in your wallet, then it's because you need to kind of ramp up production, or you need to go and speak to the salespeople. They're not working hard enough. I don't know. You need to kind of work out. So for me, I find it an absolutely fascinating concept. So that was something which came out of the Livestream extension. Kurt Graffiti did this great video where he did a set. I think it was in San Francisco in like some bank or something. Maybe it was like a Federal Reserve type bank, or it had some sort of historical significance. And we were able to kind of accept payments, and it worked really well. Yeah, it was great. That was a nice example of somebody making a niche extension. So if you think about WordPress again, you have general extensions, which are useful for a lot of people. And then you have real weird niche extensions, which will only be useful for a few people, but they're useful enough for somebody to take the time to develop them. Like my LNURL POS, because obviously that device which I'm making, it needs an extension, it needs somewhere to like send to connect to when you scan the LNURL pay, and then decrypt the PIN and send the PIN back as a receipt to the customer. So I'm just building an LNbits extension. And in fact, yesterday I made the hardware. Today I sat down, I spent like 4 hours. And I made the extension in about 4 hours. And that's super exciting. I think it's the fastest I've ever made an extension. And we need to get better at maybe making this more accessible. But now we have so many different varieties of extensions with so many different functions. If you know what you're doing, you can just go, okay, well, I need, an LNURL pay. Okay. And I think I even I checked on the Livestream extension and pulled in a function for LNURL pay into my extension. Because I'm like, okay, I need that functionality from here. I need this functionality from over here. I think within LNbits, the software, we should do a huge kind of push to documenting, useful extensions which have functionality implemented well, and then say, look, if you need this functionality, these are the extensions you should go look into to bring in those functions. Very exciting stuff.
Something that I think is kind of criminally underused within the Lightning ecosystem is LNDHub. And this is one of the extensions that I've used most often in relation to LNbits. I don't like the way that Blue Wallet sets up LNDHub through Blue Wallet itself. I can't remember the details off the top of my head right now, but there is some little detail that has made it really annoying to use. But the way that LNbits just separates it out in a certain way, I can't remember exactly once again, but it just made it a very easy process. Like I have my business wallet over here, I have my personal wallet over here. So, maybe when I'm just doing my personal stuff over here, that's not commingling with my podcast money, whatever. I like LNDHub and how LNbits supports it. Do you want to comment on LNDHub at all, or the extension?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Igor and the work he's done on Blue Wallet is phenomenal. And actually, when I was to correct myself, before LNbits, LNDHub existed for making accounts, and Blue Wallet runs on top of LNDHub at its core. Originally Blue Wallet was kind of like an example of what you can do with LNDHub. But obviously LNDHub works, specifically with LND and not other funding sources. And also at the time when I was making LNbits, I think still now as well, because Igor is like a legit genius. It's not got like a UI or anything to kind of use. It was maybe like kind of above my head, really, I suppose, maybe using LNDHub at that time, or I hadn't thought to use it, or maybe I'd have to like port it across to other funding sources or something. But yeah, it's great. One of the first extensions we made is, again, this is actually a Fairdraft extension, is the LNDHub one, which means that if you have a wallet which you've generated in LNbits, you can then access that wallet via your Blue Wallet phone. People say to us, well, how come you haven't got like an OS native app? And we're just like, go use LNDHub, just activate the LNDHub extension, download Blue Wallet, scan it, use Blue Wallet. There's no point us making a OS native app apart from for vanity and to get our own branding in there, because Blue Wallet is far superior to anything that we make. It's great. I love LNDHub, but I actually I was trying to think of a way of getting that functionality into the core, maybe a little bit more. So there's a few things which we've made into extensions, and this is very hard because obviously as we become more used to certain technology in LNbits, having access to it, like the LNURL stuff, we start to assume that everybody knows what those things are. And then we start to think, well, maybe we could just pull that into the core functionality of the LNbits wallet. So when you open a wallet, you'd have a little QR code somewhere there where you can just scan it and then, run it in your Blue Wallet. I'm in two minds of whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, because we do have on the, wallet page, we've got a QR code which you can scan, and it's just the link, the URL link to that wallet. So you can then access that on your phone or something. You can just send it to a different device by scanning a QR code. And there's part of me which thinks maybe we should have like a tab or something. And it's like, you can do that. Or if you want, you can click on the tab and you can scan this LNDHub QR code and then get it set up on your Blue Wallet without having to go and turn on the LNDHub extension. And this is a good problem to have, but it's one which we're kind of stumbling into now, is like having varying kind of degrees of maybe accessibility or support. So we've got loads of extensions and some of them are super useful. And there's people who've made extensions which aren't included in our install, or we've like deactivated by default. One of them is an ngrok extension, which is like anyone who's ever developed on LNbits finds it super useful because you know it's really quick to spin up and run LNbits on your own computer at home. But then you need, for some stuff like experimenting with the LNURL stuff, you need like a HTTPS, a URL. And the only way to do that would be to, do some port forwarding stuff and, make a secure certificate, blah, blah, blah. Or you can do like what's called a reverse proxy, which is where you make kind of a tunnel going out from your computer for that specific service for your, LNbits server. And then you tunnel out to a URL, so people can access that URL and they can access your LNbits server. So we've got an extension called ngrok, which does that. And it uses, there's a third party called ngrok, which is, you can do a free version or a paid version. And it literally, you enable it and then you get a random ugly URL, which if you click on, you can then access your LNbits from the outside. And it's, it's times out after like an hour or something. But it's great if you're developing, you just quickly need to get that. But that's a very kind of niche community extension almost. So we disable it, and it would be nice if there was I use like Arch Linux, and you have like officially supported extensions where the kind of people working on LNbits, if there's a bug or if there's something which needs changing in one of the extensions, they'll go in and like do it, and you can PR LNbits directly. And then for some other community extensions, it'd be nice if there was a way of like, you had to, in your LNbits install, you had to say, yes, I want to install these more experimental extensions from this source. And I understand that these aren't officially supported. And, if I have a problem, then I will go and speak to the developer of those officially. And then they could have their own repos and things. That's like the next thing for LNbits really, is like really thinking what we bring more into core, what we kind of distance out as being kind of community based, as opposed to like officially supported by, just because there's not enough time, officially kind of supported by the core team. So that's something which kind of a lot of thinking will need to go around, because obviously once we've built that UX, we don't want to change it. And maybe I'll have a look at other solutions which are doing that, like WordPress, for example.
Would you mind if we did a bit of a lightning round on a couple of these other extensions here and just kind of touch them very quickly here?
Yeah, cool.
All right, so I'm seeing like a handful that are maybe under the same kind of bucket of where you're adding a pay functionality and then maybe slightly like another functionality on top. So, for example, selling a domain or selling tickets or something.
Yeah, cool. Well, the tickets one, so subdomains, that was one contributed by, oh goodness me, have I forgotten his name? I think I've forgotten his name. Goodness me. Darn. If you go on the extension, it'll say his name. And that's if you've got a Cloudflare, because Cloudflare's got a really, developed API. So if you've got a Cloudflare account, if you've got a URL, and you want to sell subdomains, so like, because I'm a URL troll, I've got LNURL.com. And I might want to sell subdomains to LNURL.com. And people might want to buy them as well. They might find them useful. So if I can put that on Cloudflare, and then I can register my API key with the extension on my LNbits install, and then I can have a public-facing page where people can go. They can put in the subdomain they want. They can say how long they want it for, how many hours or days they want it for, and then I predefine how much that would cost per hour per day. And then they click on how much they want it for, how long they want it for, and then it generates an invoice, and they pay it, and then they can point that URL, that subdomain, at an IP address of their own for a certain amount of time. Super cool. We did have another thing we were building with the cloud. Oh yeah, with the Cloudflare API. So in fact, that ngrok thing I was talking about before, we're also, because Cloudflare, they do like a reverse proxy thing. So we are building an extension for that as well. So you could actually have so if you had, say, I've got lnbits.com, I could sell reverse proxies, and they could be like, lightningjunkies.lnbits.com. And then you could use that reverse proxy for your own LNbits or for whatever you wanted to. So that could be quite interesting. That was an extension we were going to build. The other one she mentioned was the events, the ticket selling thing. I made that very early on. I just wanted to kind of flex a bit. So in that, you can generate a bunch of tickets with like a closing date for the tickets and then an event, start date and closing date for the event. You then got a public facing page, which you can give to people. They can pay for a ticket with their email, or they don't have to put in an email, it's optional. Once they pay for a ticket, they get a QR code and that's their ticket. And then they take that ticket to the event, that QR code, and then using the same extension, the admin, the person who's selling the tickets, they can click on a button and they can bring up a scanner and they can scan those tickets and register those tickets at the door. So you can run like, a Bitcoin paid event. I go to conferences and I'd basically see that function. I'd see you pay for a ticket online with Lightning and then you go to the event, you show them your ticket, they scan it, and then they register you. Boom. And I just thought, well, you could build all that into an extension on LNbits. It was one of my first ones, so I think I probably need to go back and see if there's any things which I could improve. Obviously, it was completely redundant after I made it because of COVID, and people weren't having physical events where they would need that. But now, as the world starts opening up, I think more and more people start using it. And if there's anyone who wants to contribute out there and make it improve it or make it better, then please do PR. Yeah, so you're right. And in fact, pretty much all extensions are a form. You fill out a form, adding some variables, usually connected to a wallet. One of your LNbits wallets, then it generates a instance of something, like an event, for example. Then you have a public facing page, like, the place where there's people go and register those tickets, or the place where they go and buy the subdomain, or the place where the point of sale terminal is. And then, they can use that public facing page, but they can't get back to the admin page. And that's pretty much a sort of standard way all these extensions have been built. And in fact, we were trying to figure out a way, because at the moment you still have to replicate GUI stuff, where we were trying to figure out a way of just having a config.json, which you could just literally put these are the fields I want, in my form, and this is the database fields which I want, and then you could just get LNbits would just then generate all that stuff for you, so make it even easier to make extensions. But that's dead. It's possible, I'm told. That's another one of Fearchaff's ideas, but it's just dead hard and will take a while to get there. But yeah, you're right, 100%. There's a lot of repetition in functionality, but even so, there's two completely different things, selling subdomains and selling tickets to an event.
We kind of hit the extensions here. We kind of hit LNbits here. What's the future looking like for LNbits? Is there any functionality you think is missing? Are there any extensions you'd love to see, etc.?
There's tons, man. There's so many good ideas. Everyone who uses LNbits has a good idea for an extension or a good idea for some functionality. It's in beta, so you have to be careful using it. So we have 3 frameworks we use. For the front end, we use Quasar, which is great. Does all our, makes it look pretty, basically. And then for the, and Vue as well, Vue.js. And then for the back end, we're using Quart. And Quart, for Python people out there, is a asynchronous version of Flask. So Flask, it's a Python framework for building an API. Send opening. If someone goes to a certain route, like a URL, then you can get it to do some stuff and then open a page for them, so that it returns a page opened with, returns a page with, variables in it, which they have access to. So we moved from Flask to Quark because we wanted the asynchronous stuff, which makes it LNbits a gazillion times faster and brings it into the modern times. And then also we can do WebSockets and loads of craziness like that. But Quart isn't as battle tested out there in the real world as it probably should be. So we have these things. I'm going to get quite technical. We have these sort of listeners, like a nursery, where we listen to see if invoices have been paid. And if you have lots and lots of invoices going through this nursery and lots of listeners listening for certain invoices with certain tags or whatever, then it can trip over. What should happen is it should have error handling. It should show an error in your terminal and then move on, continue to run. But just because of the way Quart hasn't been developed in that area enough, it just crashes the whole of Quart. So it sucks. You have to do a restart. So we had to do some hacky wrapper. So if that part of Quart crashed, then we could try and get it to restart. But this is one of the bugs which is kind of keeping us in beta. It's just not very clean. So since we started LNbits, Fast API, which is another framework, that's really took off. And it's got a lot of support. A lot of people are using it. It does loads of funky stuff as well. So we have like validation for data, which goes into LNbits, which is being built specifically for LNbits, whereas Fast API uses something called Pedantic, which is like a framework which does that automatically, which is super clean and useful and really well researched and built. Currently, we have a branch on LNbits, the LNbits repo, where we've pulled out Quart and we're replacing it with Fast API. There's a developer called Fusion44 who's leading that, and it's absolutely awesome, fantastic work. And I think it's really important work because it's that bug, that listener nursery bug, which means if you've got a busy server, occasionally you have to it's no biggie. I mean, it takes a second to restart the LNbits server. It's just shitty. Pardon my French, but that will get rid of that. That will stop that from being a bug. Plus, it will also make like our documentation, for example, we document all of our, say if you make an extension, it's good practice to list all the API endpoints in the extension so you can use the API. But Fast API does all that automatically. And it makes like a nice GUI. So you can go to like, the URL /docs in a piece of software using Fast API. And then it will show all the API endpoints. And you can actually like put data in and run it and test it through like a GUI. So that's nice too. And it's really good for developers as well. So I think that's the next huge thing for LNbits is moving from Quart to Fast API. And it's going to bring all these benefits. But it has been something of a slug. Core is almost pretty much done, converted to using Fast API. And I think we've got the offline shop extension is converted to Fast API as well. And now it's a case of brute force, a bunch of us burning the midnight oil, going through each one of the extensions and just adapting it so it's to use Fast API instead of using Quart. Actually, Fast API and Quart kind of look similar. So it's hard, but it's not like, it's not like a huge change. So I think that's the next big thing for LNbits. As well as that, I want to see like this IBEX bank in Guatemala using LNbits. I think that's huge. And they're going to give us, because it's real world, they're going to give us all this great real world feedback. And it's cool to see like anyone can spin up an LNbits, they can offer a service and they can charge for that service. They can start making some money. I want to see more of that. I want to see more ways for a local business person or a local person to start streaming sats. A very good concept, which was suggested in the LNbits chat, is, so say if you're running an LNbits install and people are doing transactions on there's the ability for you to set a variable for a fee, for a transaction. So you can charge like 2% for when a transaction's made. The idea was that maybe you could generate like a referral link. So if I take a point of sale, say there's a hairdresser and they don't accept Bitcoin, and I go and give them a point of sale, I can say, well, look, if you use this link and then get your friend, this other hairdresser, to use this point of sale and accept Bitcoin on, use like LNbits, this particular LNbits install, you will get a fraction of the fee. And then similarly, they can do the same thing and they can get a fraction of the fee. And what you will find is that, the original forward-thinking hairdresser who realizes that, Lightning is the bee's knees and Bitcoin's great, and got all their friends that referral link, and then their friends got put out the referral link, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That hairdresser, they'll be looking at their LNbits wallet and they'll just see, the sats going up. Every time there's a transaction, they'll just get that tiny little fee and they'll just have sats pouring into their wallet. So it'd be great to kind of implement something like that, like make it more kind of incentives for people pushing the software, more educational stuff as well. We need to do more workshops, also make it easier to access and build extensions. What else is it? Oh, the admin. So currently when you install LNbits, you do it through the command line. It's not that hard. It's like 7 commands in terminal or something, but it would be super nice. And we have got a branch for it where, you could like do it all through a GUI. So you get pretty much like WordPress. Like originally in WordPress, you had to go like change the WP config.php file and put in your server details, I think, or your database details so it can connect to the database, sorry. Now with WordPress, when you spin up a WordPress, you get like a nice form. You can go and like fill out your details, put the title of the website in and all that stuff. So pretty much like that with LNbits, you have like a form and you'll be able to just fill it in. You'll be able to fill in your funding source details. And then once it launches, you would then have that first account is the admin account. And then you've got access to an admin extension. And in the admin extension, you can change stuff. So you can like change the theming of the LNbits install or limit the themes you can use. You can limit access to extensions. You can limit which users get access to your install. basically all stuff you can do now, but you have to do it through this variable, this text file where you have to put in different variables. Bring all that into the GUI to make it easier for people to do that. And then there may also be some node management in there as well. If you're running LND or something, you could have like I was thinking of when we get to that point, I'm trying to pull in the Ride the Lightning lot to make like a cut down version of Ride the Lightning just for someone who wants to open channels and use that admin extension to do so. If they're running LND or Lightning D or something on their LNbits, then in that admin extension, they can just do some of that without having to have additional software. They can do some of that functionality, that node management functionality too. So yeah, so many things to build, and anyone out there, please get involved. It's completely free and open source, very useful piece of software. It's being reused out there in the wild. People in El Salvador are finding it useful. It's creating all these new business opportunities for people, and some people with limited resources as well. So it's a very worthwhile project to get working on. Yeah, it's great. Just keep improving it, I guess, and keep letting it grow. Encourage more and more people to build extensions and develop it out further. I also think as well that LNbits.com, because currently, if you go to LNbits.com, it's like a playground. You can use it. Sometimes it'll bug out. Sometimes I'll turn the server off for a day just to show people please don't put funds on there. We're not a stable service. We're not an open node. This is literally for you to go and experiment on. If you want to run LNbits, run it yourself, for God's sake. But I do think there's a good argument for LNbits.com being a legitimate service. And in order for it to be a legitimate service, I've got limited time. The other developers working on LNbits have limited time. It needs business manager, it needs someone to tackle the regulatory stuff. We've had people in our LNbits chat say, even if LNbits.com, when you got to a certain threshold, required some KYC, people would still use it and they wouldn't even mind still using it. And it's like, well, okay, LNbits.com as an example, as a running example, which services could use, it would be nice to make that like a legitimate service which people could use if they wanted to. And I think that could then generate revenue, and that revenue could be poured into development. And obviously it'll, as a legitimate service as well, there's much more strengthening which goes into the software. And as it's free and open source software, then everyone else who's running it in the community, they all get to benefit from that as well. I think making LNbits.com is probably something which needs to be tackled at some point. Got a few people kind of interested in sort of the VC world. We're not really sure if we want to go that route, but I don't know. That's something which needs to be tackled at some point. But finding the time to tackle it is hard, particularly when you get excited and just want to sit and build goofy extensions all day.
Something that I like to do on the show towards the end here is to do that call of action. It sounds like you largely already did that call to action.
Plea to action. Please come and help.
Plea to action, right. But I guess most of that call to action was towards people that are a bit more technical. You started to address the non-technical people at the end there. Do you want to kind of briefly give examples of how people that are less technical or people that maybe need to kind of bootstrap their technical ability could get involved in LNbits?
The idea of referral fees, that came from someone who's not technical, can't do any programming. I'm assuming that they can't do any, maybe they're a shard developer, but I don't think they are. I think they're a non-technical. I have no reason to think they're a developer. Fairly confident in saying it's a non-technical person. So just playing, it's always the same with all free and open source projects. The first thing they say is just run the software. Run and use the software. By doing that, you're supporting us. It's great. Thank you. You'll find things which you think should be changed, or you'll think, oh, you could do this or you could do that. And if you've got ideas, go on the GitHub repo, put in an issue for an enhancement. If that's beyond your comfort zone, go to the Telegram group, t.me/LNbits, pop in there. We've had so many improvements to LNbits, which have literally just come through randoms, going on the LNbits Telegram and saying, hey guys, I had an idea for things like the QR code, in fact. So you could export to your phone from the wallet, having that in the wallet. I'm pretty sure that was just an idea, just thrown into the Telegram group. Use the software, play with it, find flaws, find things which could be improved, ideas for, things which could be built on it, extensions, ideas for extensions. Go chuck them into the LNbits chat. Don't feel guarded on ideas. in this kind of free and open source world, it is really hard to kind of ditch the sort of copyright, patent, like ownership over intellectual property. I think it's quite hard to ditch that feeling like you want to own something. You want to own, if you've had an idea, you want to own it. But like almost always when someone has a good idea, they keep it to themselves, which sadly happens pretty much throughout our society now all the time. People have great ideas all the time, but they want to keep it to themselves because they feel that that's how they're going to profit from it, and that's what you should do. And actually, you release it out there into the world, get people to help you build it, get people excited about it, and then you've got your flag in the sand in the timeline, and you can look back at it and you can say, oh yeah, I came up with that idea. I went and said it in the Telegram group, or I went and said it on Twitter, and then people built it and people find it really useful now. And that was my idea. And you can use that, you can even capitalize on that. Just get those ideas out there. And if you want something made, we have a bunch of really good developers who work for a bounty. I've used a bunch of times, like I'll go in there and say, I really want this extension to exist, and I'll pay 0.01 BTC, which I think is like, what's that, like $300 or something now. In fact, you probably go lower, because that used to be like $100 when I do that, and people go, yeah, because like it take some people a day to make. If you're not technical, just by running the software, it's a huge contribution. Offering up ideas is a huge contribution. Please just, that's the easiest way to get involved. And then if you want to start getting your hands dirty, have a look at the file system and have a look at the extensions, have a look at how the extensions are laid out. And it's fairly easy to kind of work out what's going on. You have these API files, and you've got the front end files in your sort of template folder. And then if there is anyone out there who's, can develop, then please jump in and help. Often I hear people say, I'm good at developing, I develop in Go or I develop in C or whatever, but I've never developed in Python. And I'm like, Python's the easiest language to develop in. So if you could do those other languages, then you could develop in for vanilla Python anyway, which is what most of LNbits is. So yeah, contributions really, really very welcome. And if anyone knows Fast API and wants to help out on that Fast API branch, check it out on the GitHub, and reach out to Fusion 44 myself, yeah, that'd be great. The more help we can get on that, the better.
So before, you were kind of talking about ideas and how someone shouldn't hold an idea inside, and I think that makes a lot of sense. What's the point in having an idea that will never get executed upon, that it's in your secret little cubby hole that no one will ever see, and it'll never benefit anyone? Like, what's the point of that?
It's kind of a scientific way of doing it, isn't it? Whereas, in science, they'll write papers and then they'll cite each other in papers and they'll reference each other. We have, like Git's great for that. Everybody, even if you're not technical, learn Git. It makes your life better. I taught my girlfriend Git. She's doing a PhD, it's made her PhD a gazillion times easier, being able to push and pull her thesis, from her repo, and make improvements to it, and then also sharing it with other people as well. But when you think of Linus Torvalds making Linux, actually I think Linus's most important work was on Git protocol. So Git's great because if you have an idea, you just write it down, publish it on Git, share it with people. Say, I did the exact same thing. I've had this idea for kind of a decentralized Uber type thing, or a censorship resistant Uber where anyone can just spin up a taxi. And I was kind of thinking about it in an LNbits centric way, but it uses the Nostar protocol, which is like clients and relays, and you send information through these relays to the different clients. So the taxi is a client and has a client piece of software, and the customers has a client piece of software, and they just communicate through a relay. And I haven't made it yet, but I just didn't want anyone else to plant that flag saying they've come up with this idea. So I just took the time to sit down and write up a proposal, and then I went to the Nostar repo and I raised an issue. I called the issue Boober proposal for a censorship resistant taxi service. I put it up on there. I tweeted it out, and then people really liked it. And I think some people got confused and thought I'd already made it or something, because I got a lot of likes for it. But then I had this really nice conversation with people saying, well, you should do it this way. You shouldn't, the way which you propose, you should try and do this instead of this. And they're all really good suggestions. And I've changed the proposal. You start that conversation then, you just get the idea out there. Then people start contributing, giving up their time to make suggestions. And now the thing which I'll go and build next month, I'm going to do this next month. I want to get it done for the El Salvador conference. Will be better because I've had all that great input and I've got my flag in the sand. I came up with this idea at this point in time. Probably someone came up with it before me, but I've got my flag in the sand. Within the scientific community, like the way science works, it's good to kind of give recognition of people when they have ideas or when they came up with an idea which influenced your idea. It's very good to give recognition of it. And you do that through references and academic papers. But I think we can do it through Git, putting issues on Git's repos and making your own repo with a proposal for an idea and publishing it and getting it out there. That's one way you can kind of plant a flag in the sand. If you want, you could even use some like open timestamps if you're really nutty and you really wanted to prove that you had that idea at that particular point in time. Then you could do that. And then you're part of that conversation and someone in the future that when they're researching, because I think guarding your own ideas just limits your imagination. Because as soon as you start having a conversation with somebody, they'll say something and then you'll go, oh yeah, and actually I could do this as well. And that's how the idea snowballs and evolves and turns into something useful. But just having that instinct, which is kind of drummed into us, it's like the common sense of our age, is if you have an idea, then you should protect it and you shouldn't tell anyone about it. You should monetize it. You should patent it. And you should get a copyright on it, blah, 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 and pay lots of lawyers to get copyright, to pay lots of patent lawyers. Yeah, I think it really limits innovation and humanity's ability to kind of progress. So, get that idea, just get it out there, get out the system. And it's actually, in fact, in Nostar, somebody had just a similar idea to Nostar, but they hadn't put pen to paper. So it was about a week ago, someone in the Nostar group posted, I had this idea, I think it's called TreeBit, and it's a lot like Nostar. I had it years ago, but I never put pen to paper. I didn't do anything about it. But now I've taken the time to sit down, write this thing out and see, if there's anything in there which you guys might find useful to the approach which I was going to take to solve this problem. And a bunch of us Nostar freaks and geeks, we read through the proposal. And there's some cool, interesting points in there. And I messaged the guy and I was like, I bet that was really cathartic, just kind of getting that, because it was rattling around in your brain for years. It's something you keep feeling you need to do, but never actually quite getting around to doing it. To get it out, it just feels good. But I bet that TreeBit guy, whoever it may be, wished that they got that idea out earlier on, just spent an evening just writing down those ideas and putting them out there so they could reference back to it. And, perhaps when Nostar was being come up with, then people would have stumbled across this TreeBit concept and then use TreeBit instead, So get the ideas out there, get the flag in the sand. Ultimately, can't take your money with you, can you? But you can, have your impact on humanity and society and get a bit of an ego boost by putting your flag in the sand.
Not to keep going with this ideas tangent, but I'm enjoying it too much here. So it seems to me that if you just have an idea and you try to kind of be the most naively selfish about it, it's going to backfire. Because this person that you're referencing that created this earlier, said, I had this idea first. I thought that story was going to go a different direction. I had this idea first. Y'all suck. Bye. And that was the end of the story. But instead, it sounded like it ended a bit more constructively there. And it sounds like he had the right idea, that it's maybe you guys can benefit from my idea versus I'm super smart and super special because I came up with this great idea. Look at me.
Exactly. And I do think that it's this concept of the entrepreneur who gets this divine inspiration and is somehow greater than other humans and is somehow cast in a different way. They're one in a million and you don't get them very often. I think that's nonsense. I think more or less most people, 50% of the population, can be that person, given the right set of circumstances, the right set of words, the right set at a point in time in their life, they can become that person, or they could have been that person. But I think it's something we venerate in society because it kind of maybe excuses the hierarchy of having them at the top and then lots of people underneath them. But I think it just suppresses ideas. There's a really nice, I don't want to go too much of a rant on this, but there's a really nice concept by John Nash, who obviously came up with the game theory stuff later on in life, and it's called Minds on Strike. once you've liberated a mind is capable of all these incredible things, most minds aren't liberated, and most minds are on strike because, daily life is a slug and it's hard. You often find, like me, for example, I love teaching. I had a very rewarding teaching career, and it's the best job anyone could ever do. And it gives you time to think. However, when I was able to take my little sabbatical away from teaching and dedicate a few days a week to doing Bitcoin things exclusively, I became hyper productive. And ideas would just fall, roll off each other. Just having that little bit of extra breathing space. And then also, I'm got an encouraging, nurturing environment, nice family, all that sort of stuff, very supportive partner. If you have the right environment, and then good ideas can most people can come up with good ideas. Most people can implement good ideas. And I think that concept of guarding good ideas, it restricts development. Look at something like the iPhone, for example. The reason, it works so well is because they hold the biggest, R&D development team. And then they hold a whole bunch of patents on all this different ways of doing this hardware, the touchscreen, whatever else. And no one else can access that technology, which they patented, because it's theirs. So the other people need to work out other ways around it. Look at within Bitcoin, Schnorr signatures, for example. The reason we're only just going to introduce them soon with the Taproot stuff is because it was under patent for so many years, and that just held back Bitcoin. Like, they just made Bitcoin have to use like an inferior technology for years. So particularly in this modern era where we're all sharing information and data with each other, I think obviously it is happening. Free and open source has really took hold, and I think Microsoft now is the biggest free and open source contributor out there. So all these big companies who really held proprietary control over information as hard and as tightly as they could, that control is just slipping away from them. And I think it's happening more and more. And being able to produce things in lots of different countries also makes mockery of patents. And like a lot of the Chinese manufacturing, they don't care about a patent; they'll just make something. They'll just they won't care about some US patent on something. So I understand the logic that if you've spent money researching and developing something, then you should then be able to profit over that thing. But I think actually you should be able to profit because you're the first one to come up with that idea. You're the first one to implement it. You're the best person to implement it, and you've got the gigabrains who came up with that idea. But I think it will probably just then limit. If those people who came up with that idea, if those engineers, the scientists came up with that idea, if they can then speak freely about that idea amongst their peers, rather than be held back by proprietary licensing, then they're going to have that conversation, and that idea is going to expand and develop quicker than if it's just walled as a garden and held behind a patent or a copyright. But I mean, we're all very aware of all this anyway within Bitcoin, because obviously Bitcoin is basically free and open source money, isn't it? Free to contribute. You can use it as much as you want. You can fork it, whatever. It's free and open source money. So we're as a community, we're very aware of free and open source ideology. But even me, if I have an idea and then somebody else comes up with that idea or someone else implements it, I kind of get defensive. I'm like, oh, that was my idea, damn it. No, it's far better to kind of get that idea out there and share it and have that conversation with people. It's much more healthy. And it liberates the mind as you do it. Like the guy who got the tree bit idea, right? It's cathartic. It liberates his mind. And then probably he'll think of better ideas and he can have that conversation with the Nostar people. And that's another thing. If you can come up with a good idea, your brain's capable of coming up with a good idea, which is great. You'll get influence and you'll get that dialogue happening.
All right. So I think we should take a step away from this tangent here and finish up the show.
Yeah, it's fun though, wasn't it? It's always good to get on the old soapbox and have a good rant.
It was good. Right. Well, I mean, I guess it's like before we necessarily switch off is I like the idea of trying to encourage my audience to examine their insecurity, let's say, because that's something that I've dealt with a lot in my life of being like, no one's going to like my idea. It's stupid. I'm not even going to mention it.
Yeah, that's the other idea. That's the other thing. Like often, I mean, we've had people do this in the Telegram group on LNbits. They'll say, oh, this is a bit stupid. Well, what about if blah, blah, blah? And then a bunch of people will go, no, that's great. we want that. That's great. Brilliant idea. So yeah, there's no such thing as stupid questions. There's no such thing as stupid ideas. Get them out there. Just getting the dialectic, the conversation is what's important.
Actually improving humanity through the ideas is the point here, not trying to be a king with your cool ideas, bro.
I mean, that's two different philosophical concepts, isn't it? There's the rhetoric and then there's the dialectic. I'm very much someone who thinks that humanity gets better by conversation, by exchanging of ideas and coming up with new ideas. Whereas some other people think that society gets better just by rhetoric, just by shouting, just by blaring out their ideas and not having that conversation. I agree with you completely. There's a lot of insecurity in, and you find this a lot actually in people who have a more of a tendency to do rhetoric. There can be a lot of insecurity there. And then quite often actually people are held back from, and I think the Bitcoin community were guilty of this with that technocratic stuff. I've asked some stupid questions and I've had some terrible ideas. I've asked some really like mundane things of some very clever people. Or like recently, like with the LNUL PRS thing, I asked Stepan, because I was using his UBitcoin library on Arduino. And I was like, dude, how do I do the LNURL stuff? Because basically with LNURL, you need to do a BEC32. You need to encode something using BEC32. And I was like, I know BEC32 is in there, but how do I do it? And he sent me this like, tiny little function. And I was just incapable of coming up with myself. And it was basically for a quantum physics professor such as him. It was a kind of a stupid question. But he was excited that I was just using his library. And he understands, my knowledge is limited when it comes to things like that. So he understands that I'm going to hopefully make something which is fun out of it. He contributed. He gave me that little bit of data there. But it's awful when people feel unconfident to suggest things or ask stupid things. It's just get involved and start chatting.
Just get in there and just start doing the thing. If you like the thing, it doesn't matter what it is to some extent. If you really like video games, go play the damn video games and, do speed runs or something and get really good at that, whatever. Anyway, sorry. So let's go ahead and close out the show here. I wanted to kind of just ask for like a general question here about the Lightning Network. Is there anything that's, coming here in the future that you're really excited about? In the last few shows, we've, talked about any prev out / BIP118 / L2. Do you have anything along those lines you're excited about or anything else?
I feel too ill-informed to say something. I'm excited about the drives chain stuff. Any priv out, I'm excited about them because people who I respect and I brush shoulders with on the stuff we work on, they're excited about those things and they're well informed about them. So that makes me excited too. But as I said, I have to keep my focus fairly limited, or else I just get confused. I would say the thing I'm most excited about in Lightning is the El Salvador stuff. I know it's kind of being pushed upon people, but just the idea of Lightning being used in the real world, those instant payments being used in the real world, to me, that I find that fascinating. And I want to support, because ultimately, yes, it's being pushed on people, but it's something which is going to dissolve the power of state and the people who at the top, isn't it? Ultimately, because you're taking it away their power over money, which is good. I really want that. It is an experiment because they're the first people to do it. I really want that experiment to work. Seeing Lightning Network on top of other things, like I like the way Liquid Network tokens, for example, you can run Lightning Network on top of them. I think maybe for somewhere like El Salvador, I think that the real negative feedback is volatility, particularly if you've got very low income. Having Lightning on maybe like a stable coin or something stable, which is on Liquid, but is also kind of like, pegged or linked with Bitcoin would be great for the people using it. You can just, it's not much of a change for them. They're still using the same software. It's just, we just fork that software and just make it work with that stable coin or whatever. They're the things I'm kind of excited about in Lightning. So it's more about how Lightning is being used in the real world as opposed to some of the theoretical protocol stuff. I'm sure if any of that stuff takes hold and does well, I'll become excited about them because I'll have to learn about it. It's funny, so going back to the LNURL as an example, when I first learned about LNURL, I was intrigued by it, but I didn't really get it. And then when I finally understood it, I was like, damn, this rings a bell. And then that's when I remembered a year earlier or something, I proposed something similar to the LNURL pay stuff on the Bitcoin mailing list, So yeah, it takes me a while for like concepts or new tools to sink in. I'm not someone who can just read a paper and go, oh, okay, that makes sense to me now. It takes me a while. I need to see. I don't know. It takes me a while for it to sink. Once it sinks in, then I get all excited about it. But no, I haven't got anything informed to say about either any Privat or drive chains. Really, just that people I know who I like are excited about them, and that's good enough for me.
Absolutely. I definitely feel like there's going to be a future show where we talk about drive chains, but I think this one's gone on long enough here. So we're going to go ahead and close it out, I think, here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's a great pleasure. I love your show, and just keep doing the amazing work you're doing, project at a time.
All right. So I think that's as good as the place of any to go ahead and call it. Let's end the show. Do you want to let the listeners know how they could find you on the internets?
Yeah, you go on Twitter, ArcBTC, Ben ArcBTC on Telegram, and the GitHub. I think I'm ArcBTC on GitHub as well. You can look at all my projects on there. If you go on YouTube and you go on the World Crypto Network, there's a playlist called DIY, BTC IoT, where there's loads of like hardware Bitcoin projects on there, which are worth checking out. And then also check out the LNbits GitHub and t.me/LNbits.
Just a note to all of our listeners out there, we had like an extra hour audio that we just had before this end here, where we went into all kinds of topics, kind of communism, kind of there, No,
don't say that. They won't listen to it and they'll unsubscribe. We both just hate on it loads for a whole hour. Yeah, it was great.
I don't support it, at least. Like, we kind of go over it and we try to have an intellectual... But we have a behind the scenes thing. You can catch that on YouTube. But for now, I'll catch you all folks later. Thanks. Boom. That was the 51st episode of the Lightning Junkies podcast. Everyone loves the podcast. I don't know what's going on, guys. I'm sorry. But I really hope you took something away from this episode, got infected by Ben's prolific prototyping, just getting his hands dirty, jumping into these things, learning these things. It's very much the ethos that we try to extol on the Lightning Junkies podcast. Our apologies, it took so long to get this episode out. Personal issues, day job, yada, yada, yada. We're trying to use Lightning Friday as a way to kind of keep things going, even if we are falling behind on our mainline Lightning Junkies shows. So I hope you'll be a bit kind and gentle with us as we kind of reconfigure things and get a better hold on our consistency going forward. Beyond that, there isn't much else to say. Please check out our show notes for our big supporters and how you can support them and support us by supporting them. Weird way to say all that, but let's just leave all this in. We're going to have the outro be imperfect. It's okay if it's imperfect. This is me as I am, just going on and on for no reason, and there's no reason to listen to any of this, just to hear Chaz talk and talk and talk. I'm good at talking. I'm also good at just not saying anything while I'm talking. I'm sure this is very much within your interest and why you came to listen to the Lightning Junkies podcast. Fire, walk with me, and I will see you on the Lightning Network.